Everyone. Hi, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might happen to be in the world. Thanks for joining us today. I'm John Dodson, the director of the Global Taiwan Institute. Here at GTI, we are a 501c3 think tank located in Washington, D.C., dedicated to research and programs to better inform the public policy debate on Taiwan-related issues and on the U.S.-Taiwan relations. And we pursue that mission through a range of programs. That includes both the Global Taiwan Brief, a publication we put out fortnightly on our website containing articles related to current policy issues affecting Taiwan and the United States. And we also put out occasional longer research reports. We have our annual conference coming up on October 1st, if I could make a shameless plug for that. We'll be releasing more information on that soon. That'll be a full day conference once again held here in Washington, D.C. And we also do a number of public policy seminars, panel discussions, such as the one that we're holding today. And today's topic is Taiwan's initiatives for civil defense amid an increasing threat environment. And I think as almost anyone watching this would be well aware, recent years have seen a very steady increase in Chinese military pressure directed against Taiwan, now with ships and aircraft of the People's Liberation Army, Chinese military now routinely operating in the sea and airspace around Taiwan, and often it's sort of closer and closer into the coast of Taiwan and closer into Taiwan's offlying islands as well as the PLA conducting now on a pretty regular basis, large-scale periodic military exercises, such as the most recent the Straight Thunder 2025A exercise that was held in the spring. Exercises that are intended both to increase the operating capability of the PLA, but also serve a political purpose intended to intimidate Taiwan's population and to erode the ability of Taiwan's government and military to enforce Taiwan's own sovereignty rights. And amid this increasingly tense environment, both Taiwan's government and civil society groups have been undertaking a number of measures to try to increase preparedness in Taiwan and to mobilize civilian resources in order to better bolster Taiwan's overall defense capabilities. I think perhaps most notably, last year in 2024, the Lai administration unveiled the Whole of Society Defense and Resilience Committee, an effort to once again try to better coordinate efforts between government agencies and civil society actors to provide support to the government in a crisis situation. I would argue that the jury's still out on how successful that effort will be. There's some promising signs, but there's still a long way to go. But that's one of the issues that we'll get into today. And outside of government, Taiwan's very active civil society has also produced a number of organizations that are engaged on this. These organizations have sprung up offering training in a number of areas to include emergency first aid, logistics. So far, we have a representative of one of Taiwan's leading organizations, the Kuma Academy, to Aaron Fong, who's here with us today. And so we're going to get into a discussion today about a whole range of these issues. And we're very fortunate to have with us three expert speakers on this topic. And my own personal preference as a moderator is, I guess, to wait till each individual person has their chance to speak to give a more detailed introduction of them. But just in brief, and I think this will be our speaking order as well. We have with us Dr. Michael Huntsman, who is both a former Marine Corps officer and a current professor of political science at George Mason University, who has written extensively on Taiwan defense issues. Who'll be giving us, I think, kind of an overview of what civil defense could or should mean and how it sort of connects to larger defense concerns in Taiwan. Again, we're fortunate to have with us Mr. Aaron Huang, who's the Director of International Affairs for the Kuma Academy, one of Taiwan's sort of largest leading civil defense organizations. And though unfortunately he could not be here with us today, He's actually calling in from Uzbekistan, which is I think a first for one of our programs here at GTI. We're also quite fortunate to have with us Mr. Joshua Brandon of the U.S.-based NGO Spirit of America to discuss some of his organization's experiences and perspectives regarding civil defense preparation in Taiwan. So I think without further ado, actually, Dr. Hunziker, if I could turn to you first, sir, and if we could bring up Mike's presentation, I'll turn the virtual floor to you, sir.
I appreciate it. As we're loading the slides, bad news, good news. The bad news is I got a script. The good news is I got a script. I'm an academic. Trust me, you don't want me going off the cuff because I go on 45 minutes. But in a classic JV move, I didn't time my script on. So any point in time, you got to give me the Oscar hook. I will take it. No offense.
I'll leave the front burning the foot stomping.
Exactly.
As necessary.
So first things first, I would be remiss if I just didn't offer some gratitude. Obviously, thank you to John and the entire GTI team for putting this very important and timely event together. Aaron and Brandon, I'm still mad because we get to actually meet in person. But to you guys and everybody else on the ground in Taiwan who's actually doing the hard work of shoring up Taiwan's civil defense efforts. And I should say, having spent time in my youth a couple decades ago trying to rebuild Iraq, while think tankers in Washington, D.C. were shouting helpful advice like you should learn Arabic and turn your entire infantry unit into a police force, I know how easy it is to nitpick from the comfort from being afar versus how hard it is to do the work. And so, I really appreciate what you all are doing. And I respect how hard it can be. Next slide, please. So with this in mind, I want to be clear for anyone who's ever read anything that I have written, and no shame if you haven't, my wife hasn't either, but I'm not here to throw any hand grenades or to be a gadfly. And it's not that I'm not willing to play that role, but I do think that the story of Taiwan's social resilience and civil defense efforts is a largely positive one. From the work of grassroots organizations like Puma and Forward Alliance to government-led top-down efforts like the Whole of Society Resilience Committee that John was talking about, the upward trajectory is undeniable. Plus, I genuinely believe that we all share the same goal, which is to avoid war tomorrow by doing the hard work today. Next slide, please. So I'm not worried that Taiwan's doing the wrong things. I am, however, concerned that we might not be able to do all the things that we probably should do to shore up deterrence in time to shape the CCP's calculus before they set us on a path none of us want to be on. Yeah, after all, if you're here today, you understand building a robust civil defense, social resilience apparatus is time-consuming work under the best of circumstances. It's not easy. And I just point immediately to the United States as an example. Our civil defense preparations, despite all this talk about great power conflict, they're non-existent. American voters rarely want to give up butter for guns. Civil defense isn't sexy like things like drones and cyber and chips. And our political leaders hate telling us that in a war, we might actually have to take a punch or two ourselves. The conditions aren't great for Taiwan either. If we're serious about this whole dangerous decade logic, I forget what the buzzword is right now, but it means that time is in short supply, and yet taking bureaucratic and social change, that's usually measured in timelines of years or probably decades, if we're being honest. Civil defense has obviously become a political football in Taiwan's polarized politics. The government is very bandwidth constrained as it tries to simultaneously reform virtually every aspect of the overarching national security apparatus, and convincing the Taiwanese people to take dramatic steps. Prepare for war is a tough sell, especially when the United States is kind of re-embracing a very ambiguous posture towards its security. So everything that follows, I'm offering in the spirit of trying to help find ways to work around these challenges so that we can pull back on the proverbial stick in a sort of airplane analogy to avoid a collision. Next slide, please. Like I said, I'm unfortunately for you, at least an academic, which means I have to, I can't, it's pathological. I have to start by defining my terms, but I do swear, I think at least there's a reason for this pedantic detour. So when I use the term social resilience, I'm really focusing on a population's ability to, excuse the phrase, but take the pain. And in my understanding, it requires a combination of mental but also practical preparation. And it can only exist, right? It requires some top level vision, but it really requires a widespread buy-in from the population, some critical mass of the population, critical mass of people who believe they can handle whatever the other side can dish out. and that they've actually taken some very practical steps to prepare themselves to provide for their own basic needs, since a government in these situations, any government, wouldn't be able to do it. In comparison, I use the term civil defense to refer to efforts, both top-down and bottom-up, to shield the population from the worst effects of organized violence. And I really want to emphasize the organized violence here. It's obviously useful to have civil defense capabilities to deal with civil unrest or natural disasters. But civil defense at its core, at least among the policymakers and decision people, it has to focus primarily, first, foremost, and really exclusively on protecting the homeland from attack. Because, and I can belabor this point in the discussion afterwards, war is a unique phenomenon. And yes, natural disasters and civil unrest are lesser included threats. So if you have the one, you can handle the other. But I'm pretty convinced that that which protects against riots and typhoons may not actually work against blockades and invasions. So if civil defense is about using all the elements of national power to shield the people from the effects of violence, then military defense involves the use of organized armed forces to apply violence to the other side to keep them from doing what it is that they're trying to do, at least in Taiwan's context. In a modern context, if the other two are some mix of top-down, bottom-up, military force, military defense is decidedly top-down, just because it requires a tremendous extraction and direction of resources in order to build modern armies, navies, and air forces. But I would at least like to highlight, and hopefully we can talk some more about this, there is another type of military organization which is less top-down, the so-called territorial defense force, which doesn't exist in Taiwan, but it does exist in places like Taiwan, places like Estonia, Finland, Poland, and Ukraine. And these types of groups are made up primarily of volunteers who have a serious level of training and a practical level of equipment, who are able to defend their homes and neighborhoods, usually with the sometimes explicit, sometimes implicit understanding that they can continue resisting even after a formal cessation of hostilities has been declared. All of which brings us to the real goal, which is deterrence. And deterrence, at least in Taiwan's case, somewhat self-evidently means convincing the CCP that it's not even worth rolling the so-called iron dice by demonstrating to the PLA that it cannot achieve its goals at a price the Chinese Communist Party is willing to pay. You could, by literally write an entire book, what it takes to deter. Let me just highlight kind of three very simple requirements that are relevant to Taiwan. First, you have to establish that you're credible. And I know it seems so self-evident, but even in the US, we mess this up all the time. Credibility is in the eye of the beholder. It's on the other side. It requires showing the other side, not yourself, not your friends, but the other side, that you have the actual military wherewithal to impose violence on them and to blunt their use of violence against you, and that you have the resolve, not just the resolve to pull the trigger to hurt them, but the resolve to take the pain on your own side. Second, you have to clearly signal this credibility, these capabilities, and resolve before the attacker makes up its mind and sets itself in a course of action. To borrow a quote from Dr. Strangelove, which I think there are only a few people in the audience old enough to get, but the rest of you should Google it. The whole point of a doomsday machine is lost if you keep it a secret. And I know there's this continual debate about how much do we conceal and how much do we reveal. The bottom line is, from deterrence perspective, you reveal it all. Because anything you say which is a secret is really just no different than a finger in your pocket that you're pretending is a gun. It also means, though, that hope isn't a course of action. You can't expect a half-built doomsday machine to deter the other side. Finally, this is key. You have to make sure that you know the other side's pain threshold and risk tolerance. Deterrence won't work if you simply threaten the other side with more pain than you can bear. All this is a long way of saying resilience, defense, military defense, civil defense, they're interdependent. We can set territorial defense to the side for now because it doesn't yet exist in Taiwan. I can talk about why I think it should. But the point is these other three pieces, they reinforce, they depend on the other two. They're also key pieces of the deterrence puzzle. The deterrence falters to the degree that the CCP thinks it can somehow circumvent, neutralize, or overwhelm any one of these three pillars. If it can nail one of them before you can do anything about it, you're not going to deter. Next slide, please. So what does this academic pedantic throat clearing apply? Well, first is I think it applies, we can be pretty optimistic. It bears repeating, the progress Taiwan has made over the last 4 or 5 years is real. And a lot of credit should go to the government for raising public awareness of these issues, and obviously, then a second, and at no small political cost, and for doing the things that need to be done to lay a legal and a regulatory framework. So I'll rattle off a few examples that'll be very familiar to an audience like this. The Civil Defense Act and the All-Out Defense Mobilization Agency, they offer a legal foundation. They delineate roles and responsibilities. They establish a bureaucratic apparatus to oversee civil defense. A lot of work remains to be done, but the framework matters. It is the key piece of the top-down exercise. President Tsai's Force Posture Realignment, announced in December of 2022, prominently incorporates civil defense into Taiwan's overarching defensive posture. And of course, President Lai's Whole of Society Resilience Committee helped bring political salience to something that otherwise was largely being done at the grassroots level. Nor, and I have criticized this in the past, but nor has these efforts been all talk and no action. The commitment to improving civil-military integration, again, these have to be integrated at every level. It is clear. The first time ever, the government introduced urban resilient exercises to coincide with the big showcase annual exercise in July. And there's a visible emphasis on local exercises and in particular on improving medical readiness. I want to emphasize government level stockpiling and finding creative ways to facilitate wartime distribution. All good things. And it also goes to non-governmental organizations like Forward Alliance and Kuma Academy. A lot of their accomplishments are self-evident, but they still deserve to be highlighted. By training civilians in the practical aspects of things like first aid and survival and self-defense, these groups are filling a gap that the government can't or isn't currently providing, as is clearly evidenced by the long wait lists for their training sessions. It's at least my contention that citizens who are confident that they know how to take care of themselves and their families in a crisis will, by definition, be more resilient. And this pool of trained people can serve as a pool for first responders that might be able to support overtaxed civil defense authorities and volunteers. I think some of the other benefits of the work that these organizations are doing are maybe less obvious, but still deserve mention. This ever-growing population of trained volunteers, I think if the government ever decided to create a territorial defense force, could form the foundation of that force. Even if the government doesn't decide to go that route, and my sense is they're not, but these folks are still well-positioned to informally help Taiwanese or potentially even allied forces operating in theater. As Forward Alliance, Spirit of America, Kuma Academy aren't aligned with any government. It can be more appealing to people for other reasons who want to join the military. And as Raymond Woe helpfully points out in his very recent War on the Rocks piece, which if you haven't read, you need to read it. The more that friends and colleagues and neighbors are signing up for these types of training exercises, the more it's creating sort of peer pressure, a social incentive to get off the fence and join. And so we could see some benefits from this. So I think in this way, this bottom-up effort is an important tool for fostering broad support. And again, especially for resilience, resilience has to be reaching a critical mass. Next slide, please. So given how urgent the threat is and how inherently challenging it is to do all these things, I'd be remiss if I didn't offer at least a few suggestions moving forward. Again, understanding I'm sitting on the sidelines safely 7,000 miles away. First, I'd love to see the Lai administration create a territorial defense force. The fact is that the most robust social resilience and civil defense schemes in the world aren't going to deter the CCP if it thinks it can quickly defeat Taiwan's military defenses. And I've written about elsewhere, happy to talk about in the Q&A. I don't think we can discount the chance that the PLA is planning to surprise, neutralize, or otherwise bypass Taiwan's conventional defense forces. I don't think this war is a case of hey, diddle, right down the middle across the Taiwan Strait. Blunting this risk requires filling that gap between Taiwan's conventional military, which, let's be honest, needs some serious reform, and its civil defenses and social resilience capabilities, which by themselves cannot slow down an invader and delay long enough for outside forces. A territorial defense force that consists of volunteers that are trained and equipped to defend the places they live can start to fill this gap while credibly taking a quick surprise victory, a fait accompli, off the table. But in any case, if territorial defense is something any government's going to want in the future, given how long it's going to take to create this out of whole cloth, you got to start today. Second, although civil military integration is getting better, it still has a long ways to go. A lot of that falls on the Ministry of National Defense, which, as I understand it, is still dragging its feet, as are the armed forces, on embracing civil defense as a core mission So it's not just about happening in parallel during an exercise, but actually literally integrating command and control. And I get why it's faster and easier to work through agencies like the Ministry of the Interior that are willing to play ball. But resilience and civil defense aren't going to work if they aren't fully integrated into the overarching military plan. You know, we talked to the last administration here in Washington, but this integrated deterrence is never really a good idea. In Taiwan's case, the threat is it's too proximate. Taiwan's battle space is too limited. There's no way to separate the battle space from the people. To think that civil society and the military can wage parallel things. Third, all credit due to the civil defense and social resilience efforts, but a lot more can be done to enhance bottom-up buy-in and participation, especially when it comes to, only very practical here, individual stockpiling. I still get the sense among everyday Taiwanese, not those people who are prominently involved in these efforts, even those who support the government's work, that resilience is a bit of a curiosity. And that far too many still assume that they can rely on the central government to provide for their basic needs. And I'll admit my data isn't exactly scientific, but I have spent 1 month on the ground in Taiwan in each of the last 2 years. And every single person that would talk to me or talk to my family, I would ask the question of how much food and water do you have at home? And the answer is usually, a couple of days. And that answer needs to be weeks or months. Remember, the best estimates, very optimistic. I was a part of the June TTX in Taiwan. The best estimates are it's going to take the U.S. 2 weeks to arrive in force. When I helped write Boiling Boat, our marching orders from Matt Pottinger were to plan on 2 months. Wherever that number is in between, or possibly longer than 2 months, I don't know. Even when U.S. forces arrive, it's not like suddenly the civil distribution of food and water is going to turn on like magic. It won't end the problem of providing food, water, medical care for 23 million people. They have to be ready to do it themselves. Nor are earthquakes and typhoons a good guide, because those are relatively fast moving compared to a war, and they allow a government to concentrate its resources when obviously everything the PLA is going to be doing is trying to both decapitate and spread those resources thin for a long period. Last slide, please. Finally, I do worry there's a bit too much emphasis on the performative aspects of social resilience. I understand the need to clearly signal to Taiwan or to Taiwan's partners that it's serious about these measures. I can totally appreciate the domestic political opponents who are ready to pounce at any evidence that this thing isn't working, that there have been mistakes. But I took this picture myself while just wandering the streets, because my habit is every time I see one of these signs, I follow it. And I'd say about 50% of the time, it leads me to a dead end or to a wall or to an alleyway. This is a sign that points me directly to a locked garage, and I tried to open it. Signs that point to air raid shelters that don't exist or you can't access ultimately do more damage than good. I can't speak for Taiwanese audiences, but I do know that American audiences, especially here in DC, they grow skeptical when exercises look too polished. I remember a very prominent convoy marched up from Kaohsiung all the way during Hong Kong 41, and every one of those vehicles was spotless. And I've been in the military long enough to know if you've driven a Humvee for more than an hour, it's spotless. When war games validate existing plans instead of revealing gaps and weaknesses, and the government touts numbers that everyone just knows are too good to be true, it's probably proving counterproductive. Said too much, I'll stop here. Happy to hear any questions.
All right, hey, thanks a lot, Mike. I, for myself, very much appreciate the slideshow presentation, having been brainwashed as well as a junior officer that every function of life requires a PowerPoint brief. I understand those chains can be difficult to break.
They are impossible.
But in this case, I think it added a lot. I jumped on a few thoughts as you were speaking, and one I might try to return to in the Q&A if we had time, was that you were discussing some of your comments, sort of your own views of the need for a territorial defense force, which you've written on before. And I would say up to now, I think Taiwan's civil defense efforts, or those of civil defense oriented NGOs in Taiwan, have really not had any kind of much of a paramilitary aspect to them. It's all been focused on first aid, logistics support, just emergency relief, these sorts of things. And whether or not there might be more of a need for, I don't know, some sort of paramilitary component, or how that would even be possible, with the current state of Taiwan law, Taiwan's culture, and so forth, I think would be something interesting to turn to, time allowing. But I do want to turn next to our next speaker, Mr. Aaron Huang Timan. And Aaron is the Director of International Affairs for Puma Academy, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a Taiwan-based civil defense NGO. I mean, one of the largest in Taiwan. dedicated to the motto, Sidus Pacem Para Bellum. I didn't put the Latin to that, but if you want peace. And Kuma Academy has a number of programs. They seek to build a self-defense capability in Taiwan society by providing knowledge and skills to help people sustain themselves and recognize enemy disinformation operations in both peace and wartime situations. From their mission statement. In pursuit, the Kuma Academy offers to the public a variety of training courses that range from the nature of modern warfare, information warfare and what it is, first aid, evacuation planning, and so forth. And we're very fortunate that Mr. Huang has traveled all the way from Taiwan to join us for this week and give a presentation about Kuma and some of this work. So Aaron, I'll turn the floor to you, sir.
So once again, thank you to John and GTI for providing this incredible opportunity to represent Kuma Academy to share with you what we do, our operations, and of course, the will and the works that of the Taiwanese citizens who train with us. So I want to continue from the optimistic note, some of the optimistic note that from Michael, that we've done some to share some statistics with you. So we've done a survey at the end of 23 asking if war would happen, what would you choose to do? Obviously, the survey was done by hired company, so it fits the general shape of the Taiwanese demographic. So three options were given, but of course they were free to choose not to answer. So we're fortunate to say that 58% chooses to resist, 23% chooses to surrender, the rest don't know what to do. Now, happy to say a similar survey was conducted, again, not by us, but by INDSR. I'm sure you're aware for. If you don't know, INDSR is just our think tank based in Taiwan. They often provide our M&D with research opinions, but in any case, that from that survey at last September indicates that 65% chooses to resist. Now, how do we convert that inclination into preparation action is crucial. So obviously, there's more than one solution in terms of how NGO approach this issue, and it's good because it makes it on a broader scheme more difficult to become a target, also become a kind of like a unified front line. In any case, let's jump to what Kuma Academy does. So Kuma Academy was established in 22, and so we are a relatively young NGO. So we set out to prepare our citizens not just in the face of natural disaster, although albeit natural disaster is something that's a recurring theme, is something that has tied Taiwan and its regional neighbors in a very strong way. But we also make it clear that our preparation is geared towards war catastrophe. So in those cases, we need our citizens to get ahead and prepare themselves, because in those urgent times where first responders and combatants will be stretched extremely thin, hospital system, the firefighting system will be overwhelmed. In a lot of cases, citizens do have to rely on their own, such as to decrease the pressure for the first responders. So that's what we set out to do. In terms of in emergency situations, we want the citizens to understand who they are, where they are, and what actions to take. So next slide, please. We might have to jump a couple. So they are co-founders, Mr. Promotion and Mr. Marco. I'm sure many of you know Promotion's current decision as a DDP legislator. He was asked to join the campaign in late 23. And Mr. having a background in criminology and of course, a long-time researcher in Chinese disinformation tactics. Mr. Marco Ho is a long-time researcher in strategic studies. So in the beginning, when we set up to do Kuma Academy, Mr. Marco provides lots of curriculum regarding modern warfare science, while Kuma along with the good folks of some think tanks provides the curriculum regarding disinformation. So next, please. Right. So the rationale is that it is generally agreed upon that if it comes after a struggle of the air and the sea, coming down to a sea to land invasion, that is, there are about 11 potential beaches that is wide enough and deep enough for invaders to continuously send armored men and supply. So that being said, there's going to be limited space for combatants to engage, which meant that a larger part of the population will be remaining at the outback. Now, going back to our survey, how we convert the inclination to resist into concrete action has a direct impact on how the defending efforts. So it has to be built on very concrete preparation, such as practice techniques and resource reservoirs. So that's what we set out to do. So next, please. Right. So we have a wide array of programs. We try to publish a updated civil defense handbook every year. So in 23, we published our first junior version of a civil defense guidebook. Last year, we published a full version, one on disaster preparedness, one on psychological defense. And this year, we're also looking to publish a third one. So online courses and physical in-person training is always a session. We're very fortunate to say that until now, through our social media outreach, we've reached out to a little bit more than 3 million Taiwanese citizens. Now we know that those are unique users. And more than 100,000 Taiwanese citizens had training with us in person. They could be promotional events, they could be basis camps, and they could be outdoor drills. Now I'll explain in detail what those are later. So in some we do train our instructors in some capacity because some of those fields are simply something doesn't fall in the current criteria for certification, such as disinformation or disaster prevention, disaster preparedness. Right. So next, please. Right. So there are some of the role we believe so the events could contribute. Just not going into detail tonight. We'll just jump to the next slide. So to summarize, we want to be able to support the outback. That's of course in contrast to the front line. We don't seek to take the work that has already that already exists done by either combatants or first responders. But we do want to equip our citizens with means to survive. That is a key point. And we do have a lot of citizens coming to us quite anxiously, either themselves or just come to terms with the potential eventuality of war that they need to prepare, also, or their family members are victims of disinformation campaigns. So in that cases, we want to be the first classes for them to come to. A lot of students do come to us. Their anxiety were lift in some ways, but we often tell them this is just the first step to go with. And of course, in the very beginning, besides providing evacuation workshops and first aid skills, what we set out to do is to help our citizens understand in terms of physical threats and cyber threats what Taiwan is up against, which is why later you will see that our curriculum includes modern warfare science and disinformation and cognitive operations. So we wanted our students to understand what it is to do, not just assess, but to understand that how the citizen in the context of 21st century warfare. And of course, it is very obvious that we've entered a stage of information war, a warfare at this time. So next, please. Right. So these are some of the from the regular operations that we have in at Kuma Academy. So open lecture comes in all kinds of very flexible in terms of form. It could be online, it could be offline. It could it could be as big as a couple hundred of people attending. So engage in topical issues on national defense and civil defense. Such as to promote the necessity and the rationale of civil defense. So in the past, we talked about how China is infiltrating Taiwan through our temple system, through our religious context. We talk about the use of drones battlefield, obviously. We talk about multiple times about Ukrainian warfare. And of course, we talk about the passing of Prime Minister Abe ornament to between Taiwan and Japan, which is very crucial at this stage. Basic Camp is an elementary course that serves as a stepstone to our advanced courses. So it includes 4 classes from 9 to 5, which includes modern warfare science, disinformation and cognitive operation, basic relief homeostasis, and evacuation planning workshop. I will explain those in detail later on, as those are quite crucial. Training and drills is something that we do every 6 months. In fact, we're having our 6th edition at September 20th. In Taipei. It involves more than 100 plus students who have been to the basic camp. What we do is we ask them to come back and go through a full day of simulated scenarios outdoors. That includes mass casualty relief, evade hostile tracking, geolocation to local mineral resources. And this time around, we've added more situational situations for them to react upon. So such as calculate people in need of food to assemble certain calories, or including random people trying to harass them, and of course those people are grouped together randomly. They wouldn't know who they are, and we don't really allow them to go into groups. But the key point is not for is for them to assess how well equipped and prepared they are. They wouldn't know the script, so obviously it's not meant to go smoothly. It's meant for them to make mistakes and find out what they might be lacking. So next, please. Right, so the four main fields of our curriculum, also the four classes from the basic system. Now, the reason we teach modern warfare is that, unfortunately, not just Facebook, but Taiwan does have 5 million TikTok users. So that provides a perfect breeding ground for false narratives to take hold, such as imagine how many money you can save from procurement programs for the West, how much more you can feed. All of these is meant to marginalize discussion regarding national defense and to kind of like invite a surrendering sentiment, right? So in this class, not only do we provide or refute those claims, but we also provide objective facts to help our students to cope with these mutating, what we say, war propaganda, scare tactics. So, a couple ones more prominent include decapitating our government heads within 24 hours, storming our west coast with 50,000 ships, or to launch 1,000 missiles at once, right? Hitting blind targets. We explained that, let's take one for example. So, storming across with 50,000 ships. So, a lot of these claims are based with 30% facts and 70% fabrication. So that's how it gains credibility. At the first time, at first hearing, you think that, hey, this kind of makes sense, and following up. But journalists would have the first idea how to refute them simply because of the lack of knowledge. You can't really blame them for not understanding or looking deeper into this. But in any case, again, so storming our west coast with 50,000 ships. Does China possess 50,000 ships? Sure, even more, of course. But as early as our high school education, we understand that the Taiwan Strait is also referred as Black Ditch, simply because the geography narrows, making the sea extremely turbulent. Many mainlanders who tried to move centuries ago simply didn't make it. So you can imagine the logistical challenge for potential invaders with a full load of equipment, armored ships, so going very deep into water, trying to make it constantly through this part of the ocean. But we're not saying Taiwan is invulnerable. There are a number of factors that desperately needs overhaul and update, and it goes way beyond our civil defense system, but such as our information resilience or our potential mob infiltration scenario. And we understand that a lot of these mobs were funneled money through third-party channels. No concrete evidence had ever been presented, but also we know that there's very little preparedness in terms of the severance of undersea cable. But then again, we want students to understand these situations so as to, in a democratic society, support our government's policies. So this information in colony operation, we break down how Russia operated against Ukraine in 3 stages: during peacetime, before war, during wartime, and we're at the stage where Taiwan is at the stage where our adversary is trying to paint us in a very controversial color in the eyes of the international community. Just months ago, I think the chairperson of KMT openly claimed our elected president Lai Ching-te as Hitler, and such sentiment wasn't meant as a direct accusation, but to paint Taiwan as controversial in a controversial place, so as for international support to take a second guess. So similar tactic was used for Russia. Before they launched a full-scale invasion, what they do was to disseminate large amounts of information claiming that, for instance, the USA is building biolabs in East Ukraine, and the Ukrainian government is working with them by using Russians living in Ukraine as test subjects, therefore to develop bioweapons to use against the Russians. Now, you can find that report online by Microsoft. It is an operation targeted against New Zealand audiences. So as the point was to numb international reaction, so as to buy time for Russian military. So and of course during the full-scale invasion in 22, they launch a full-scale campaign, both online and offline. In regards to online, huge amount of disinformation on using very vague materials, claiming that Russian military has driven very deep into Ukraine, saying that your government heads has already fled, both to not just to disorient the citizens, but to demoralize the defenders. So obviously, explain how these three stages, how they correlate together, and to provide you with the idea of how this has amount to a full scale war in terms of in the cyberspace. Under Xi Jinping's command, a formal information support group, 战略信息支援部队, was established under his command. And we know that from Union Shinwen, within this rank, there are about 100,000 POA officers working on not just cyber warfare, but also united front networks against Taiwan. So going back to a little bit to what I said about infiltrating or religious context, similar tactics was used against a variety of demographic to try to have them to, let's say, 交流, to have exchanges, communications, for them to visit the mainland and for them to have established contact. The point wasn't to turn them over, but the point was to have multiple large amount of channels to to steep them into this Chinese-friendly environment, information environment, right? So to provide you with another two more alarming examples of what we faced. Back in 2019, there was a sudden surge about air pollution and how air had worsened in Taiwan through years. Some of you may already know this research was also made prominent. But we through the efforts of some think tanks at the time, in the span of 6 months during 2019, they were able to mobilize 20,000 accounts, each posting 1,500 replies per day on Facebook, on a variety of top pages, and in regards to how air had worsened through the years. So imagine, the point of this information is that it was meant in this day and age, in the 21st century, in a cyber environment, they can deploy in such huge amount. So many people going to research on disinformation, it's true to understand that disinformation and counter warfare existed long before computer existed. So it's something that's used since ancient times, but in the 21st century, it gained a huge momentum through the information environment. So again, I might be reiterating myself. So with that kind of circulation, major news channels called on, newspapers called on, government officers were forced to, especially the central government, were forced to make response. And at the time, we even have a opposition party mayor saying that the government treats citizens as second class by placing a coal generator within the city. So all of this circling back is meant to paint our government as incompetent and corrupt. And unfortunately, most democratic bureaucrats were slow to react, because this is something that they've never encountered before. And through on our latest presidential election, there were 10,000 cases of recorded foreign information manipulation interference. Most of these attacks happened 48 hours after the voting was after the voting process. It was meant to discredit our confidence and of the voting process, not to change or alter the outcome of the voting. So all this was pretty much gearing towards pulling our trust in the government down. So you can imagine back in the pandemic days, there is this 2-minute conference held by CDC every day. So when we needed some news or accurate information, we just go there. But if our confidence in our government is eroded by a series of tactics, we're not saying we can't have doubts. We're not saying we can't have doubts, but these kind of operation seriously endangers our information intake. So imagine if we no longer trust the government sources or official sources, we need other reliable sources, and that's where they swoop in with their preferred channels. So going to basic freedom homeostasis, we explain in theoretical, we go into an hour about theoretical knowledge, such as what you lose before going through shock. And then we go into the practice of bandages, tourniquets, and safe way to extract injured person out of the danger zones. So the tourniquet is something that's rather new in a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, when we set up the tourniquet. It wasn't popularized, but it is pretty much now, not just by us, but also among the 200 registered Taiwan civil defense groups here. So it's very much a gearing towards let's say combat unit. So with natural disasters, it is less likely you would have any traumatic implication. So finally, evacuation planning workshop is something that we help our citizens not just only to prepare themselves but to assess situation. So obviously, if our invader had needs to assess the cost, they would select their targets in their missile strike. So for instance, because for instance, we are citizens to understand where they are. So to assess whether the likelihood of themselves being impacted and whether they should evacuate. Because right now, Taiwan does not have the capacity or logistics to relocate a large amount of population. So we generally encourage a two-wall policy. So two-wall principle, sorry. So to have to stay away from the impact and the shockwave in the shattered pieces. But there are situations, again, to assess whether you have to evac. For instance, if you're near a governmental building, a power facility, a water facility, a generator, those are the scenarios we have to evacuate and need to think about if, for instance, a rendezvous appointment with a family, if communication goes down, do you have a place to rejoin your family? And a lot of citizens in Taiwan seem to think that if war would happen, they can simply retreat to the mountains because no one goes to the mountains. But that can be more wrong. Food and water is not secure. That rounds up about the curriculum about Kuma Academy. Next page. So this is the fall curriculum. Some of those classes, much of these classes are still operational. But as you can see, the more forward fields of our basis camp. And I would say add one thing though. The open source intelligence is something that we are one of our major training. So we're very happy to say that right now we have a little bit more than 1,000 citizens trained in open source intelligence investigative capability. Now, in the future, we hope to put them into more organized work. But in the meantime, we have to think about the safety and security of our participants, and not just participants, but also our staff as well. Next page, please. Yeah, right. So some photos to show. These are our past events on about open lecture. And next, please. Yeah, business camp. You can see Market Hope, Martian, and our students writing down their evacuation plan and practicing a tourniquet. Next, please. Advanced courses, just to name a few: military simulations, introduction, kindergarten, physical training. Yeah, next, please. Right. So the training drills. As you can see, the only thing we hand out, I don't think we hand out those anymore, are those physical maps. Otherwise, they bring all their equipment. In all these drills, we really see the activeness of how our students really take it upon their own to prepare themselves and their family. So we just every time we were amazed of how we're prepared and how they go beyond what we've tried. So right now there is I'd say a very organic development in our civil defense in Taiwan. Is that as you may know, there is a recall movement. Some of you may know, may not, but regardless, it results in local communities bonding together. Now they know that they stand strongly in defending Taiwan, and they share the same value in the process of trying to vote out unqualified legislators. But in those cases, after the voting, they seek to continue this energy to build a sort of a local community within their voting area. Anyway, and a lot of them do take frameworks from a variety of sort of advanced classes, us included, and we're happy to see that they could use those materials to customize to their local conditions, because obviously they know best where the facilities are, right? So that's something that's happening, and the drill continues to be a testing ground for their preparedness. Next, please. Right. So we just strategize our communication. So this is a Kuma Forest Fun Fair. We noticed that a lot of families will basically attend our training, but nonetheless, there are a crucial need of civil defense preparedness. So in these case where we put together 10 civil defense related games that includes basic binding, showcase difficult planes, memorize your press information, and recognize your location. So we don't really talk about disinformation or modern war, but we just want them to have the most practical bonding experience over. Right. Next, please. Right. So last year we organized a global leaders forum on civil defense. So the main thing was about discussing what's happening in Ukraine right now and where Taiwan might be lacking. But really the overall theme was the only thing that's going to keep us safe is deterrence, because we know that Ukrainians had made multiple concessions and that didn't change the outcome, unfortunately. Yeah. So next, please. Yeah, I think I will stop here and like to looking forward to discuss with you all.
All right, Aaron. Hey, thanks a lot for that presentation. Certainly very detailed. And one of the things that really jumps out to me that I personally found was interesting, I think is very valuable in your comments, is I think a lot of people who aren't perhaps familiar with Kuma Academy might not be aware of the extent of the work that you folks do related to disinformation, information warfare, political warfare, hybrid warfare, whatever term you want to apply to it, which, as I see it anyway, is really critical in understanding modern warfare. And I think many people who would tend to think about civil defense would think of it in kind of more traditional physical terms. Civil defense means where the shelter is and how to get there. It means you know how to do first aid. It means you have clean water and canned food stockpile. But not thinking so much in terms of understanding the nature of the modern conflict, and particularly how the Chinese Communist Party conducts warfare. And once again, I've jotted down a number of questions that I think we'll try to return to in the Q&A time allowing. But once again, thanks for that. Now, I do want to turn to our third speaker, Mr. Joshua Brandon. Josh has served since 2020 as the regional director for Spirit of America, a U.S.-based NGO that is involved in coordinating civil defense training or maybe first responder training, let's say, in Taiwan. Mr. Brandon is the director of Spirit of America's Indo-Pacific program, managing a portfolio of assistance projects throughout Asia, including in Taiwan, Philippines, Mongolia, India, Laos, Vietnam, Palau, and Myanmar, and also he's coming to us from late in the evening in Uzbekistan. So perhaps we need to add that to the list. Since 2021, he has led Spirit of America's whole society campaign in Taiwan, working with both civil society organizations and government agencies to develop programs in training and mobilizing civilian volunteers, improving government crisis response, and building digital resiliency and regional connectivity. Prior to his time or his current role with Spirit of America, Josh was a U.S. Army infantry officer, and during his service, he was awarded both a Silver Star and 2 Bronze Stars with Valor devices. Subsequent to his military service, he has also done work on veteran mental health and conservation issues with the Sierra Club. So, and once again, Josh, a personal note of thanks for being so flexible and despite your travel complications, your willingness to speak to us from late in the evening where you are in Central Asia. And with that, again, I'll turn the floor to you, sir.
Okay, thanks, John, and thanks to the rest of the Global Taiwan Institute as well for putting this together. Aaron and Mike, really good to see you, and really enjoyed your presentations as well. Like Mike, I do have a bit of a script as well, but that's more for jet lag and a bit of a plague that I picked up 2 days ago. So bear with me a little bit. Today, I'm going to briefly talk about Spirit of America's work, but more importantly, I want to talk about some of the lessons learned from our civilian and government civil defense work in Taiwan. First, SOA is a privately funded nonprofit that supports U.S. national security. Our mission is to engage citizens in preserving the promise of a free and better life by working with U.S. troops and diplomats to save and improve lives abroad, promote shared values, and strengthen alliances. I think we do two things really well. First is what we'll call rapid targeted assistance. And this is really, filling gaps in government efforts in everything from natural disasters to war zones, to include, $20, $30 million of assistance for the Ukrainian TDF in the first 3 months of the war. The second thing we do really well, I refer to as angel investing for international affairs. And this is where we're really looking for entrepreneurs, be they, US or local partners that are at the point of the problem, that have an idea on how to solve it. And, typically through a lack of funding, or my favorite, a lack of efficacy, because the idea is so new that it needs to be proven. We can come in, help them design, test, deploy, and potentially scale these ideas globally. We've been working in Taiwan since 2021, and our mission has really been to support Taiwanese national resiliency through a whole of society of approach. Our first program is civilian-led resiliency. We're working with pioneering nonprofit organizations such as Ford Alliance, Kuma Academy, and Watch Out to educate, train, and organize Taiwanese civilians to support their governments and their local communities in a crisis. To date, our partnerships have trained over 30,000 people directly, over 600,000 online, and we've engaged over 5 million through online content and guides. More importantly, our partners such as Foreign Alliance have created nascent networks of over 600 partner organizations at various stages of readiness across the country. Our second program is government partnerships. We work with government partners such as the National Fire Agency and the National Police Agency to advance government capability in any crisis. Here we've helped advance civilian volunteers in support of the government pilot of the Taiwan Civilian Emergency Response Team program, one that has been adopted and implemented nationally. We've helped the National Fire Agency, or NFA, to develop and certify and launch a national tactical emergency casualty care program. It's really the standard for first responder or end user medical care in crisis. But we established these programs and standards and supported pilots for alternative service conscripts and reservist training programs nationally. We've also been able to help government and civil society partners rapidly test and deploy systems such as mesh network technologies, drones, and information sharing systems. One of the many lessons learned over the last few years, really there's two I want you to walk away with from this talk. First, I want you to understand the variability of demand for service and build the volunteer infrastructure around it. And second, meet your volunteers where they are at and focus locally to make a national impact. There's a constant focus and pressure on government and civil society to show numbers. This is numbers of people trained, numbers of volunteers recruited, numbers of people engaged online, et cetera. While these are important network or metrics, in my opinion, we're chasing the wrong indicator. Through our work in Taiwan, civil resilience training, supporting the TDF in Ukraine and looking at natural disasters in the US, we've come to understand that there's a variability of demand for service and crisis response. You can think of civilian action or volunteerism in a crisis as a demand for service. And this demand fluctuates as man-made and natural disasters ebb and flow. On your average day, the service is at a low but constant rate. This is the part of the population that's actively participating in civil society and government volunteer programs. At the point of crisis, the curve spikes as more people are directly or intrinsically motivated to volunteer or serve in some capacity in that crisis. This demand stays steady and then decreases as the crisis abates and moves into recovery and rebuilding phases. More simply put, the expectation that civilians will remain in a constant state of readiness is unrealistic for a variety of reasons. The main one being that you're competing with everyday life. There's school, there's work, there's Netflix. People just aren't going to be prepared for something that may or may not happen 24 hours a day for the rest of their lives. While training numbers matter, we found it to be more effective in preparing for crisis is to build the infrastructure to absorb the increase in demand of civilians to serve at the time of crisis. This means that the focus of our civil society and government partners should be to create trained leaders and cadre and administratively organized partners to take in, assess, equip, and deploy large numbers of civilians in a crisis. Essentially, you're building the infrastructure to absorb the demand for when it spikes, when people want to serve. You can pull them in, you can lead them, and you can deploy them. Further complicating the issue is volunteer motivation and location. In 2023, we concluded that the current government and civil society volunteer program recruitment and training rates were insufficient to meet the numbers necessary to provide an effective civilian response capacity. Let alone act as a deterrence or confidence builder to natural or hybrid threats. This was based both on an assessment of the estimated capacity needed to turn out trained recruits in time to make near-term impact via data collected in our biannual surveys. And simply put, at the rate people are being trained by both government and civil society groups, it's going to be a long time before they can, using current systems, before they can actually get the numbers needed to actively deter or build confidence within the nation, however you'd like to look at it. What we found here was that 60 to 70% of people across geographic, demographic, and political groups felt an obligation to serve in a crisis. They were motivated to protect their families and local communities first. We asked them a variety of reasons, from patriotism, national identity, all the way to local communities and family. And the vast majority of people that were participating or felt an obligation to participate listed their families and local communities first as the primary motivator for a potential service. Thus, this rendered the idea of essentially mobilized volunteer corps ineffective. The solution was to meet our volunteers where they were at and focus on local, decentralized, or grassroots networks that would serve as a national capacity in the aggregate. This led to a more decentralized focus, adopting a B2B or a network-to-network approach. Instead of spending resources on individual recruitment, we moved to recruit existing organizations such as nonprofits, churches, community groups, business affiliated groups, and incorporating them into our network. This proved to be beneficial for several reasons. First, motivated organizational leaders and early adopters are just easier to recruit, thus allowing for a more efficient use of resources. Using the leader-based train-the-trainer model allowed for partner groups to train at a pace conducive to their own needs and time, and it allowed the groups to customize their training and mobilization plan based on their strengths and needs. Essentially, instead of trying to fit them into a box that they may or may not be of value in, you can create an avenue for them to serve how they're willing and how they can. This also creates the infrastructure inside of the organization to absorb member demand and deploy in a crisis. Again, remember to create that infrastructure so that when 5 people turn into 500 trying to serve, that even that localized organization has the leadership and the organizational infrastructure to absorb and deploy them effectively. Taking the action is often the first and most difficult and resource-intensive step in recruitment. Members of these groups, especially civil society organizations, had often already taken the first step in volunteering or joining a group aligned with their interests and values, and were already organized into an existing organization. Again, just from lessons learned of spending so much money trying to get individual recruits into training and then put them into groups with people they may or may not know, and then train leaders, it was readily apparent to us that there was thousands of pre-existing organizations with motivated people that had already taken that first hard step of taking action. So for us, that really proves that for us, that was far more beneficial and efficient with resources and trying to rapidly expand the network. Ultimately, the network is more important than the training at first. Centralized resources such as training and communications can be pushed down to a large number of groups who then train simultaneously at their own rate. This reduces the demands on central demands on central resource providers and organizers. Where are we at right now in terms of civil defense or civil-led movements in Taiwan? So there seems to be a constant run of criticism at the lack of progress in Taiwan. Having the perspective of being there since October of 21, I've seen significant progress. And as Mike said, it's generally an upward trajectory. Similarly, time is of the essence. I think an easy way to describe our civil society and government partners where they're at in terms of progress is to use Jeffrey Moore's crossing the chasm theory. Entrepreneurs and early adopters such as For Alliance and Kuma Academy and organizations such as NFA within the government are at the chasm. This is the most vulnerable point in the process and will require deliberate support to effectively cross it and reach mainstream adoption. The pilots are done, the training has been developed and deployed, the networks are being built, the concepts are proven, scale is what's needed. National and international support is needed to scale existing efforts and build infrastructure to absorb demand and deploy the volunteers in a crisis. It's not sexy, it takes time and funding, all of which are in short supply. In the absence of government funding for civil society, the Taiwanese private sector has to step up and fund these initiatives. Additionally, the US government and civil society must stay committed to seeing these programs scale and not get distracted by shiny new objects. One last thing I wanted to address in terms of what's next is, think of a whole of society approach to unmanned systems. Civil society has proven to be a leader in resilience innovation. It's time to apply that to unmanned systems. Civil society needs to lead on a whole of society drone moonshot, so to speak. Taiwan society should be a drone society. A few points on this. The goal should be should be to create a societal reserve to be expanded on the demand to support first responders and military in a crisis. Again, think back to that variability of demand model we discussed earlier. We need to leverage all of society and meet them where they are at. Let's recruit non-traditional populations such as esports communities, high school and college students, volunteers, scooter repair shops for maintenance. The potential volunteer corps here is endless. Civilian recreation and civilian defensive drone use will create new demand, and it's going to supplement government, military, and enterprise demand for platforms and complements. Really, the goal here is to foster investment in a blue supply chain. I always like the terminology. U.S. and Ukrainian innovators are supported by Taiwanese manufacturers. Create a friendly space for drone development, be it actual airspace through working with the Civilian Aviation Authority or space for innovation, a maker space, to create the foundation for innovation and training in both drones and complementary systems such as communications and maintenance at every level of society, high school, colleges, groups within the government, private sector, etc. Finally, we must find a way to engage the millions of Army and alternative service conscripts, reservists, volunteer fire and police, as well as more local government groups such as local civil defense groups and disaster readiness volunteers. Outside of civil society, the government has hundreds of thousands of built-in reservists and civil defense volunteers, and they should be a prime target to create this drone reserve that could support the government in both natural disasters and wartime as well. With that, I'm looking forward to the questions and answers session, and thanks for your time.
Hey, thanks a lot, Josh. Much appreciated. In your comments, I was really interested to hear some things you had to say about sort of the level of capacity within Taiwan's society and how that a lot of that may be untapped. It actually was reminding me of piece was written this week, I think by Raymond Waugh, published in War on the Rocks, talking about how but basically arguing that sort of the will to fight or the will of the public to contribute to defense resilience in Taiwan is maybe higher than a lot of people give it credit for, but that it's been impeded both by political polarization and maybe the lack of leadership or institutions in which to channel some of those efforts. I found that interesting. And for your comments on drones, I'll have to throw in a very shameless plug for GTI. We're actually going to have an event on that very topic next week. If you look at our calendar, we're going to be having another public seminar similar to this one, focused on the issue of drone production in Taiwan, possible avenues for U.S.-Taiwan cooperation. In that, that will be this coming Monday, and organized by our staff member Jonathan. So take a look at that on our calendar of events on our website if you're interested in that particular topic. But with that, once again, thanks to all three of our speakers for their presentations. I think we'll now try to devote the rest of our remaining time for question and answers. So for those in our audience, if you do have a question that you would like to ask, do raise your hand. Do we have microphones or no? Okay, and we will turn to those questions. Again, I might have used the traditional moderator's prerogative to direct a question to our speakers. I jotted down, we got quite a few, but maybe one of the ones that I will turn to, and I had mentioned it sort of after Mike's presentation. Once again, Mike has done some writing work on, well, I guess some writing advocating for the creation of a territorial defense force or something like that, or citizens militia, which currently Taiwan does not have. There is a military reserve component. I mean, I myself have written a number of things that have been very critical of the current state of Taiwan's military reserve component, and have argued that Taiwan really needs to better professionalize that system. There needs to be more rigorous training, and to build it towards something more on the model of what Israel has, what Switzerland has, what the Nordic states, the Baltic states have, and so forth. But if I could turn to that issue of some of the, well, I guess some of the potential issues surrounding that, and whether or not it could even be possible, under the current state of Taiwan law, with Taiwan's culture, with a very limited, with Taiwan's very restrictive gun laws, and just sort of what the possibilities might be for developing something like that. So I'll open that up to all three of our speakers, and I'd particularly be interested to hear Aaron's thoughts as well, offering the comment that for Kuma, much of your training has been focused in the information realm, on first aid, logistical preparedness, but in your logo, the bear does have a gun. It's a very cute bear holding a big machine gun. But what would be the prospects for some sort of actual paramilitary training, or is that really not on the books, or not a realistic, viable prospect at the moment? So again, I'll open that up to any three of our speakers who might wish to address that.
I mean, I'm happy to, I'll get the ball rolling. Let me start with, I think the biggest impediment is political. If I could do politics, I wouldn't be a political scientist. So I have to say I would defer to the political leadership about the political feasibility in the current moment. I would say the institutional and the regulatory legal frameworks would not be an easy lift, but it is not an insurmountable one, provided that there's sufficient political will to pay the political price to do these things. But that's why you have to get started now. The laws do have to be changed. Well, I should say the M&D. I think there are a lot of different ways to skin the proverbial cat about creating one of these. One would be to create it and nest it within the Ministry of National Defense. That's what Admiral Lee and I advocated for a few years ago. One could try to establish it inside of the Ministry of the Interior, just because that agency has proven more flexible and has already done a lot of the legwork we've talked about. Alternatively, one could look towards grassroots civil organizations. I think that's legally certainly a more challenging thing to do. The key in my mind, though, is if we think about all of these definitions I've talked about, social resilience, I mean, you have to have pretty widespread buy-in. The barrier to entry is low, but you got to have a lot of people willing to do that. Civil defense, I think, as Joshua aptly pointed out, you don't have to have as many as long as you have a framework in place to expand as necessary. But territorial defense, I think one of the silver linings is you don't actually need a large cadre to get the process started because, right, it's the threat that leaves something to chance, which deters. And so having a seed, a kernel of an organization, even if not large initially, would I think be sufficient to change the CCP's calculus to say, well, maybe it's only 10 or 20,000 strong right now, but that could grow very quickly in a combat or a post-combat environment, assuming the train-the-trainer model has worked. And I like to remind people that what we faced, I was in Iraq as part of the invasion in 2003. I went back in 2004 as part of the reconstruction. And we, 150,000 combat-tested Marines and soldiers, we were getting thwarted by about 20,000 insurgents at the most at the outset. Now, that insurgency quickly fanned the flames and it grew much larger, mostly because, much like the PLA, the US military had focused on high-end fighting and largely discounted the problem. You know, that's a bushfire we could put out. But history tells us a force that focuses on the high-end fighting will likely prove very inadequate and, if not, actually counterproductive in dealing with the territorial challenge.
Aaron, did you have any?
I'll go ahead and address that logo.
Is any of this realistic or no?
Obviously it is it's very important that as a NGO that remain within the legal boundaries of what we can and what we cannot do, because it's incredibly important that under the context of social resistance that we remain legitimate. And so as a way to continue our conversation and legitimacy with the public and also with the government. Now, the logo thing is, in the very beginning, we recognize what we do is provide deterrence. And it's kind of like what Mike said, that we need to show that we're just as willing to inflict pain and ready to take pain from our bullies. And so, you know, imagine that if it weren't a rifle, it were a bag or kind of something else equipment, that would confuse the message. Now, I'm not saying that we're not overlooking the kind of side effects that is taken upon us. And obviously, it became an easy way to paint us as a paramilitia or a radical group. But then again, we try to have more citizens, joining civil defense in a long-term conflict process, and I think the effects were shown in our social media network. We continue to provide knowledge-based content. We post almost 3 times a week, and those are not reposts, those are not updates, they are unique posts, helping our citizens to interpret ongoing situations. What is the meaning behind the blocking or passing certain bills? What is the implication behind China's pressure testing or the severance of our undersea clearing? How does that impact us? And how can we build our structure to become more resilient? So I think that, but then again, the rifle logo kind of show that just how easy it is to unsettle our society when we talk about war preparedness. But then again, but we do recognize that, but so in a lot of occasions we do try to mitigate that, and we do have another logo using a separate go back on different occasions, right? So obviously in the kids period we're not using the rifle.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So, but then again, the rifle was to show a clear message that we're making. But then again, everything I'm doing.
Determination rather than a paramilitary focus.
Right. We're not saying the perfect solution. Yeah.
Anything or no?
Yeah, thanks. I do agree with Mike in terms of like this framework or creating this structure to absorb demand, and whether it's realistic or not, the lessons of especially from Ukraine and forming one are very real. And it's not just about absorbing a mass amount of volunteers, but it's also being able to assess their talents. What is their civilian specialty, what they can do best, and how they can put them into the fight or put them into a support role. But I would say, in the absence of a TDF, really, I think the government has to double down and support these civil society efforts that are politically feasible at the time, that are capable of rapidly expanding and building support as well. So.
Take some questions here. I think the first hand I've seen up, I think Garrett, we'll go to you, and then we'll move over to this side of the room. But Garrett, yeah, go ahead.
My name is Garrett Renowis. I teach history of Taiwan at George Mason. John and also Mike already referred to the recent article by Michael Kuo, and his basic analysis is that problem of Taiwan is not the will to fight, but the political polarization. So particularly to you, Aaron, what kind of additional arguments can we use to convince Kuomintang and TPP folks that this is really essential for the long-term survival of Taiwan?
Well, the rationale is that we often have disaster prevention measures on a family level, on a community level, on an administrative level. That doesn't mean fight natural disasters. The prevention for the protection and prevention of in a case of fire or insurance policy for a car accident is just necessary while not inviting. And while there are no insurance policy against a war catastrophe, the only preparation one can make is to face the issue and prepare yourself in terms of first aid, in terms of this resource reservoirs. That's the rationale we continue to push. And while we don't choose and neither possess the will or capability to have any aggression towards our neighbors, the fact that Kuomintang Academy was publicly sanctioned by the Taiwan Affairs Office from China shows just how what aggressors' mentality is. Yeah, so I hope you answered the question.
I'm going to go over here. I think, Mel, I think I saw your hand up. Please go ahead.
My name is Michelle Rochon, and I was listening to what you had mentioned earlier. Initially, the first speaker about civil defense with a top-down to bottom approach with the assistance of protecting homeland security. If I understand that was Michael correctly. But my question is, based on that statement that you made earlier, how do you integrate a military-style system into a larger community? And one of the major reasons why I am posing this question to you this afternoon, because having resided in Baltimore City for several years and returning to the Washington, D.C. area, I've been here now about 5 years almost. There appears to be a very controlled military style environment. And I don't know if I missed something in terms of Homeland Security and their style in Baltimore City, and arriving in a new jurisdiction that do it differently. But it appears to be a certain, and this is my perception, a certain level of control and almost like a dictatorship environment when you're on the street. And I do realize that you have drone surveillance. You also have that in Baltimore, but it doesn't appear to be that feeling that you're being controlled or you're under some type of authoritative dictatorial-like system. So how do you bring up community people and people who are tourists and people like myself who are temporarily residing in locales? How do you bring them up to a military style so they can fit in if that's what you're doing?
Okay.
Sure. So I mean, a fascinating and timely question. I have to admit, I actually live in Texas, so I can't comment on what's happening in DC and Maryland anymore. We have our own challenges down south. I would say, I think you raised a bunch of very important issues. One of the challenges, and here I would defer to people who have a lot more experience in Taiwan than I do. There is this issue of authoritarian legacy and polarization, which is why it's so important that some of this work, much of this work is being done at the grassroots level by non-government, non-military organizations. But there is an inherent tension. I do believe social resilience, I think, need not be militarized. civil defense does need some degree of top-down, centralized, at least framework building and institution building. And the reason is simple. War is a unique human phenomenon. It is about imposing unacceptable pain in the form of death and destruction on the other side, with the goal of overwhelming their ability to react and think. Militaries over millennia have evolved to do one simple thing, which is to impose order on chaos. And the whole point of civil defense is to say, I can't stop every arrow that's being slung at us, but what I can do is shield enough that you all can have time to survive, to think, to recuperate, and to act. And from that perspective, civil defense needs to take some of that military-esque sort of order building to say, we have basic training. When having been shot at, I can tell you, like, your world quickly goes like this, and you can think of a couple simple things, and those are the things that have been drilled into your head. And so from that perspective, I think civil defense does have to take this military, and I do think it is incumbent and a challenge that organizations, I know Inaku pretty well, like Forward Alliance and Kum Academy, are trying to do, is to balance that need to drill in a military style, but without sort of those authoritarian overtones.
Actually, if I could follow on up on that briefly, I might address this maybe to Aaron or to Josh. And Aaron, this was something we had touched upon a little bit in the private discussion we had about some of these issues yesterday. But I was wondering if you could comment on sort of, well, again, going back to last year, the Lai administration has made sort of a major initiative of the whole society, a defense and resilience committee. But I was going to ask if you might share some of your thoughts as to what is the state of coordination between government agencies in general, in a broad sense? So that would include a number of them. You know, the Ministry of the Interior has been mentioned, the National Fire Agency, the National Police Agency, and then but also with the Ministry of Defense with some of these efforts. I know it's been my own impression, and from a number of conversations that I've had, we've heard that there seems like there are some parts of Taiwan's government that are maybe more receptive to working with civil society groups, with civil defense groups. Perhaps, the National Police Agency, for example, we've heard the Ministry of Interior might be a little bit more receptive. I've also heard that in other parts of the government, particularly like the Ministry of Defense, might be more resistant or a little more hesitant to engage with civil society. But I would say, just based on your own experiences of trying to conduct civil defense training in Taiwan, do you have any sort of thoughts as to sort of how the state of that cooperation stands, and like where there still needs to be improvements? Any thoughts you might have to offer?
Yeah, I think the whole Society Resilience Committee is definitely a step up, because that's never been seen before. And I think it shows that our current administration understand that we're facing a threat that requires the mobilization of a whole society, which doesn't just involve the traditional defense department, but also major supply chains, Buddhism groups that has a Tzu that is very prominent in disaster relief efforts. And Kum Academy was also asked to join, and experts in organizations in regards to transformation were also asked to join as well. And I think for more concrete actions, I think the latest Hangwon drill it involves major retailers in I think in some temples. I think and for your information, there are more temples than convenience stores in Taiwan. It's exceeding. There's 6,000 convenience stores, and there's more temple than that. But in any case, it serves as I think it shows that our administration understand the key point of involving NGOs. And now this time around, Kum Academy was also asked to, they understand that our strength lies in the promotion part. And so now, then of course, we're not saying that we take everything from the administration and do so, because that's not really, but we do have a popularized, in promoting disaster prevention app from the government, because we understand that they probably have the best infrastructure and plan A, plan B, plan C in regards to the establishment of disaster relief infrastructure. So I can say that in regards to our communication to the MND, well, obviously we have more communication with the MOI because under which the Ministry of Interior, under which the National Police Agency is responsible for the civil defense groups, at least on the township level. So, and I really hope I could say that we have more exchange and conversation efforts or dialogue established with our MND, but it wasn't yet. It doesn't necessarily have us, but I think the issue relies in transparency. Citizens need to know, again, going back to the idea of making sure that our citizens as well as aggressors understand what kind of punch we're ready to pull, what kind of punch we're ready to hit back with. And that at this point, I think very little dialogue has been established, but we have seen some progressive steps by our current minister. So including abolishing goose-stepping, bayoneting, and that involve more combat training in our compulsory services. So it used to, and then again, in the Taiwan administration, the serving time was again back to a year. And we've heard that this time around, in a lot of recall, 教招, a lot of recall of veterans, not veterans, but the people who had served compulsory service. It was much more intense, but they feel a general sense of honor after the serving. But of course, it's very painstaking.
Yeah, so I think everybody's aware that increasingly every year at the national exercises, you're seeing more and more participation by national and local NGOs in these exercises. What I think is far more interesting and has been really effective is civil society and government cooperation in what we'll call the resiliency innovation space. And so this really a couple examples of that. I previously mentioned you have a Ford Alliance that works with NFA to pilot what their national civilian volunteer program will look like, or to works with the national police to develop what their national their alternative service conscript, like an advanced training program, could look like. I think something else that's happening, really below the noise, is you're seeing entrepreneurs from the military, from police, fire, from civil society, quietly working together, and they're experimenting, they're talking, they're conducting small exercises to really figure out what does it look like that when civil society works with the government at the point of the problem, whether it's a national disaster or in wartime. And again, these folks are out, these grassroots folks from within the government and within civil society are outpacing the government. And that's okay, because I think a lot of those, what they learn and what they come up with and how they operate is really going to inform what that looks like, either as a national standard later or just by default when they go to it in a crisis, sooner than later.
Thank you very much, Josh. Let's go one more. Let's see the young lady with the glasses in the back. Yeah, I think your hand is up. Please go ahead. Could you just briefly introduce yourself and ask your question?
Of course, I'm Yufeng Zhang from Georgetown University, currently a MS student in foreign service, second year. Thank you all for being here and for the great presentation. My question is mostly directed to Aaron Huang, but it's also open to all. So for one, you talk about disinformation and how that should be combated. I know that that is very much depending on individual critical thinking, but Taiwan also has a fact check center. However, I don't think it's really useful. Last time I checked, the daily people on there is almost zero, very less. So I'm curious, what's your thought on combating disinformation? Should it be more top down, or should it be like more local among people? Because as many of you said, Taiwan is a very divided society right now. So I'm curious, what's your thought on that? And a second question is regarding the all-out defense education, because like you said, Kuma Academy has been doing many activities, conferences and drills among Taiwanese people to do these defense education and all sorts. But I'm curious, does Taiwan do have a national, formal all-out defense education that's delivered, I believe, in senior high? I'm not sure if junior high has the same kind of education, but they definitely do have in senior high school. From my experience in those classes, we're not being taught any of those information you said about. It's more about sometimes it's about not taking drugs, how you face sexual assaults, those kind of information. Yes, they're important, but I believe if a course is called all out defense education, there should be more on the topics of defense. So I'm curious, what's your thought on our educational system, and has Kuma Academy done anything to, you know, maybe talk about this issue, or have you guys thought about this?
Right, so this information, so in our classes, we always said it's never a good policy to engage in honest skirmishes against against cyber armies. You know, they could be one man behind 100 phones, so it doesn't really make sense to do so. But what is important is that the disinformation or campaign, or human campaign or conspiracy theory cannot be recognized by the content of which, but by the channel of how it's being circulated and how it's being operated. So that takes certain level of skill, but it would rely on the experts to eventually provide the entire scheme of how information is being trafficked from questionable channels. And then again, regarding channel, I think it's we haven't yet reached the stage where we were able to make entirely transparent of such as YouTube channels or Facebook accounts, fan pages of what it's originating, where it's originating from. It could be, in a lot of cases, Southeast Asian accounts talking about, domestic politics in Taiwan. Now, there is issues, there is concerns, because why would a faraway country talk about domestic issues and trying to criticize our current administration? We're not saying then again, we're not saying that we can't make criticism, but we're saying that we have to look at how information is being produced and molded into become and ready for consumption for users willing to consume them. And in a lot of cases, unfortunately, a lot of Chinese legacy media do circulate messages from this office or the people's daily, I think. Yeah. So that's unfortunate, but they understand that people in Taiwan wouldn't go to their website, wouldn't go to a Chinese website or to a Chinese official account to look for news, but they know that we will consume the news that circulate in our local news networks. So that's also part of how it's being done. So then again, it relies in the end on public education and experts providing how information is being trafficked. And going to the second part of defense education, I think that I can imagine it from our administration, it could become a very easy target for opposition parties to say that, oh, you're turning high school into training camps, into boot camps, we're sending our youngsters into warfare. It's just that in Taiwan. So what we do is we fill that gap for people who are willing to cope with the situation and to understand that hey, this is something that's crucial. Yeah.
Right, and thank you very much, Sharon. I think we could continue to discuss all of this for hours. There's a lot of complex issues wrapped up in all of this. But unfortunately, we have run over on time. Once again, excuse me, on behalf of the Global Taiwan Institute, I wanted to thank all of you for joining us today. Once again, please do keep an eye on our website, on our calendar. If this program interested you, we have more coming up. As mentioned, we have a program next week about issues with drone production in Taiwan. We also have another seminar coming up about issues with energy resilience in Taiwan. And once again, on October 1st, we're going to be having our annual conference here in Washington, D.C., which will be open to the public. We'll be putting out more information on that very soon. But once again, I wanted to offer my personal thanks to all three of our speakers for joining us today, especially, and all of whom I guess I've had to cross distance to get here. Mike from Texas, Aaron from Taiwan, and Josh joining us from Uzbekistan. So round of applause. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll join us again for our next program. Everyone, have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
I'll get you next time, Josh.
Yeah.